What transpires when a very wealthy man speaks rudely to a server in a tongue he assumes she doesn't comprehend, only for her to reply adeptly? Have you ever observed how just one remark, a small phrase, can completely alter the atmosphere of an entire space? This is precisely what unfolded on a pleasant Thursday afternoon within an upscale dining establishment in Scottsdale, Arizona. The venue gleamed from its floors to its ceilings. There were marble surfaces, shining wooden tables, and soft ambient music intended to soothe patrons, yet also signal the establishment's costly nature. Servers navigated with precision, balancing serving dishes with an expertise acquired through many months of enduring extended work periods. This is where Danielle Rhodess enters the narrative. She was not the type of server who blended into her surroundings. She carried herself with calm assurance, her dark locks neatly tied back, her notepad constantly accessible, and her smile courteous yet authentically expressed. Regular patrons were familiar with her by her given name. She did not merely place meals on dining surfaces. She acknowledged guests, recalled their meal selections, and inquired about their relatives. However, on that particular day, the gentleman seated at the window corner table was not the sort to value such attentiveness. His identity was Farid Al-Mansuri, an immensely wealthy entrepreneur hailing from Dubai, present for a succession of business engagements. He wore a custom-made outfit that appeared to exceed the restaurant's entire monthly lease cost. His timepiece, substantial and golden, glinted whenever he adjusted his forearm. He exuded an impression indicating, "My desires are met precisely when I choose them to be." As Danielle approached to welcome him, the atmosphere already began to change. "A pleasant afternoon to you, sir. We bid you welcome. May I offer you a beverage to begin?" she inquired, pen ready, her tone calm and businesslike. Farid initially did not raise his gaze. He tapped his mobile device, his attention fixed on something deemed more significant than the individual before him. A few moments elapsed prior to him eventually looking up, briefly assessing her, and murmuring, "Lemon-infused water, exclusively that." No expression of gratitude, no cordial grin, merely abrupt phrasing spoken as an instruction. Danielle offered the type of skilled head movement that service employees acquire to navigate challenging workdays. "Certainly, I will deliver that promptly." She turned to depart, yet at that precise instant, Farid's mouth formed a shape somewhere between a knowing grin and a contemptuous grimace. He inclined his body towards the gentleman seated opposite him, a junior colleague, evidently keen to gain favor. And then, speaking in Arabic, Farid uttered a handful of phrases. The manner of speaking conveyed the full message. Even if one lacked comprehension of the idiom, the implication would be clear. It was not words of praise. It was not innocent light conversation. It represented the sort of observation individuals voice when they presume no one nearby will grasp their meaning. Danielle reappeared with the water-filled glass, placing it gently onto the surface. She maintained her pleasant expression, but her vision registered a fleeting change in his countenance. She had encountered sufficient Arabic through the years to discern its cadence, its severity, and the disparagement concealed within the speech. And at that point, the unease commenced to intensify, imperceptibly akin to a distant tempest, yet steadily approaching. Farid remained unaware. He was excessively occupied, engaged in navigating his mobile device, directing another observation in Arabic towards his companion. A faint chuckle ensued, indifferent and contemptuous. He believed himself to be dominating the space, the most intelligent individual present at the seating arrangement. Yet, the characteristic of excessive self-importance is that it frequently prevents one from perceiving reality, which is directly before one's eyes. This was because Danielle Rhodess was more than merely a server. She possessed her own background narrative. A narrative that would soon render the whole dining establishment quiet. But prior to reaching that particular juncture, let us observe this seating area for a slightly extended period. and witness how the slightest interaction initiates a fundamental alteration for all involved. Danielle displayed no reaction. Extensive experience in food service establishments had prepared her for such encounters. One attends to patrons who regard one as inanimate objects, others who treat one as a private counselor, and then individuals of this specific nature. Individuals who utilize wealth as a form of protection and presume the entire environment conforms to their wishes. She jotted down his request on her writing tablet, despite having already committed it to memory. A straightforward glass of water with lemon was vocalized in a manner resembling an order. She exhibited no astonishment, but what truly bothered her was not the specific item requested. It was the manner of delivery. It was the style in which he communicated in Arabic, his pitch lowering, the self-satisfied curve of his mouth as he surveyed her from head to toe as if she held no significance. "Good sir, would you be interested in hearing about our daily featured dishes?" Danielle inquired, her tone composed. Faird hardly lifted his gaze. I stated, "Water? Is it necessary for me to reiterate?" His intonation was pronounced, his utterances brief, each one feeling like a minor affront. The colleague seated opposite him, a more youthful gentleman in a dark blue jacket, moved uneasily. He was distinctly uncertain whether to offer amusement, concurrence, or remain unspoken. He ultimately opted for quietude, his focus directed at the eating utensil before him. Danielle did not insist further. She had acquired the skill of restraint. She simply inclined her head and proceeded back towards the counter where several other service personnel had begun to observe the exchange. One of them, a vertically built individual named Brandon, elevated a single brow. "Is all well in that area?" he inquired, maintaining a hushed tone. Danielle offered a slight movement of her shoulders. "Nothing out of the ordinary. Some individuals perceive only the serving apparatus you hold. They do not perceive you." However, as she directed her attention back to Fared's table, she observed him scrutinizing her. Not with inquisitiveness, nor with benevolence. It was the gaze of an individual appraising an inanimate item. And then, once more, he leaned towards his accompanying colleague and uttered a cutting remark in Arabic. On this occasion, there was no possibility of misinterpretation. The disparagement was unmistakable. He was commenting on her outward presentation, her bearing, and her manner of articulation. Danielle's facial muscles tensed, but she offered no reply. Not at that particular moment. She neared the table once more. "Have you had the opportunity to review the selection of dishes?" she inquired, posing the query to both gentlemen. Faird placed his mobile device down for the inaugural time and engaged in direct eye contact with her. A confrontational element was evident there. "Provide me with the lamb and guarantee it is not excessively cooked. I harbor no faith in culinary establishments within this nation." Danielle recorded the request without uttering a sound. She then directed her attention to the companion who eventually spoke, his tone courteous, nearly remorseful. I would like the salmon, if you please. Much obliged." "Certainly," Danielle stated, her pleasant expression reappearing for his benefit. "Would you prefer either rice or green produce as an accompaniment?" "Green produce, if you please," he responded, his voice conveying a sense of ease that someone had acknowledged his presence as a sentient individual. She departed from the seating area, yet Fared's derisive laughter pursued her once more, spoken in Arabic. A swift derogatory comment cast like a projectile, and again Danielle intercepted its meaning. The crucial detail is that Fared was unaware of her personal history. He was oblivious to the fact that Danielle had resided for numerous years in Morocco, alongside her maternal grandparent subsequent to her parents' marital dissolution. He did not realize that Arabic was not merely a linguistic subject she acquired, but rather a language intrinsically linked to her formative years, her relatives, and her perception of self. He was ignorant of her capacity to comprehend each individual utterance he expressed. Danielle transported the requisition form to the food preparation area, delivered it, and briefly rested against the workstation. Her cardiac rhythm was not accelerated. She had cultivated the ability to regulate such responses. However, internally, a sensation began to manifest. An intuition suggested this was not merely an additional discourteous patron. This was an individual on the verge of acquiring an unexpected valuable insight. She inhaled deeply, repositioned her protective garment, and proceeded back, out once more into the consumption space. Yet, the pivotal event remained in anticipation. The instant when expressions intended to diminish her would abruptly forfeit their impact, completely reversing the dynamic of the entire setting. The dining establishment was not boisterous, nor was it entirely devoid of sound. A gentle murmur of discourse permeated the atmosphere as dishware gently collided in the kitchen and drinking vessels softly impacted at adjacent seating arrangements. Individuals were discussing professional matters, familial units were consuming their midday meal, and a pair positioned near the fenestration were in close proximity, engaged in quiet dialogue. No individual was allocating significant focus to Farid, at least not at that particular juncture. Danielle reappeared, bearing a container of baked goods and a modest dish of dairy spread, the customary amenity the establishment consistently provided. She placed it down softly, maintaining a businesslike, pleasant expression. "Here is some bread for you while you anticipate your main course," she articulated. Farid offered no reply. He regarded the receptacle as though it were beneath his station. Then, directing his attention to his companion, he uttered a cutting comment in Arabic, his vocal projection just sufficient for Danielle to apprehend it. Inferior quality, precisely like the individual presenting it. Danielle became motionless for an infinitesimal moment, her hand still resting upon the border of the surface. Her countenance revealed nothing, yet internally the remarks impacted her like a physical blow. She had previously encountered more offensive statements, indeed, substantially worse. However, this situation differed. It was not solely concerning the bread, it pertained to her personally. The companion's gaze darted uneasily towards Danielle. He undeniably comprehended the spoken words as well, yet he remained mute. His quietude conveyed immense meaning. He was excessively apprehensive to correct his superior, overly keen on preserving his employment security. Danielle withdrew her hand, stood upright, and offered a serene inclination of her head. "Savor your meal," she uttered gently, turning her back. Yet, Farid had not concluded. Not at this point. He reclined in his seating apparatus, slightly slackening his necktie, and spoke again in Arabic, this time with increased volume. "Observe the manner in which she ambles, as though she possesses proprietorship of the establishment. A serving professional exhibiting excessive self-importance. She believes herself to be significant merely because she delivers dishes to dining surfaces." The utterances permeated the atmosphere with the force of breaking glass. A pair of individuals seated in close proximity tilted their heads in bewilderment. They lacked comprehension of the tongue, but they could interpret inflection, haughtiness, and derision. Its meaning was self-evident, even without linguistic interpretation. Danielle halted midway across the expanse, her back presented to Farid, her gaze fixed upon the counter. She clutched her writing tablet more firmly. She was not merely perceiving spoken sounds, she was perceiving accumulated instances of disregard. Numerous periods of individuals presuming her unsuitability, many years of being undervalued. She briefly shut her eyelids, introspecting. Upon her return, her facial demeanor remained unaltered, still composed, still self-possessed, but her cognitive faculties were already anticipating the exact instant she would offer a retort. Reverting to Farid's seating area, the companion shifted with renewed unease. "Perhaps we ought to lower our voices," he murmured. Farid displayed a self-satisfied smile. "Why so? She lacks comprehension of any single utterance." He indicated Danielle with a swift movement of his wrist, as if dismissing an airborne pest. Individuals of her caliber never do. It represented the type of statement that, if articulated in English, would have elicited instant disapproving looks. But in Arabic, Farid believed himself to be secure. He was not. Danielle once more drew near the table to replenish his beverage. She placed the container down, elevated his drinking vessel, and initiated a gradual pouring motion. Her gaze connected with his, unwavering and direct. Farid inclined his body forward, his mouth twisting. And then, in Arabic, he articulated the solitary remark that would fundamentally alter the entire situation. She should feel fortunate that we even permit her employment here. An individual of that nature is suited for the food preparation area, not positioned before my person. The remarks were not solely discourteous. They were humiliating, devoid of all fundamental deference. The accompanying individual lowered his vision, feeling mortified. A gentleman at the adjacent seating area looked up, perceiving an escalating strain. The dining establishment appeared to become marginally more hushed, as if in anticipation. Danielle placed the drinking vessel down delicately. No forceful impact, no severe motion, merely calm, measured exactitude. She receded a single pace from the seating arrangement, her focus continuously fixed on Farid. She had absorbed sufficient information. However, the subsequent event was not an outburst of fury, nor was it vocalization at high volume. It represented something considerably more impactful, something capable of rendering the entire space silent within moments. The drinking vessel rested between them, moisture accumulating on its exterior. Farid displayed a self-satisfied grin, assured, leaning back in his chair as though he had just achieved a personal triumph. He retrieved his mobile device once more, manipulating it, disregarding her as if she were non-existent. Danielle drew a soft inhalation. Her vocalization commenced softly at first, almost tenderly, yet in flawless, flowing Arabic. Would you care for additional baked goods? Or do the disparagements suffice for your satisfaction? The utterances penetrated the space, separating them with clarity, sharp, accurate, without a single misplaced sound. Farid's mobile device slid within his grasp, nearly striking the table with a clatter. His head snapped upwards, eyes widened, his self-assured facade crumbling. For the inaugural time since her initial approach, he appeared discomposed. His companion's mouth fell open. The man faltered in speech, oscillating between English and Arabic, then reverting again, as if uncertain which tongue was appropriate for the instant. You are fluent in Arabic?" Danielle's stare remained fixed on Farid. "With expertise," she responded, still communicating in Arabic. Her vocal pitch was not elevated, yet it projected effectively. Individuals at adjacent seating arrangements, though not comprehending the specific phrases, could perceive the alteration in the atmosphere. Eating utensils paused mid-chew. A soft wave of quietude expanded. Farid blinked, endeavoring to re-establish his composure. He compelled a laugh, sharp and fragile. "Oh, so you acquired a limited vocabulary from a conversational guide. Charming." Danielle displayed no discernible reaction. "No, I acquired it from my maternal grandparent who nurtured me in Casablanca. Every single utterance you have articulated since my arrival at this seating area. I comprehended fully." The accompanying individual reclined, his hand obscuring his mouth, partly from astonishment, partly from shame. The pair at the adjacent table, sensing an important development, exchanged glances. They possessed no knowledge of Arabic, yet they required no interpretive assistance. They could interpret facial expressions, vocal qualities, the palpable intensity, permeating the space. Farid's mouth opened, then sealed once more. His lingual organ moved rapidly over them as if seeking a repartee, a stinging retort to direct back at her. Nothing materialized. Danielle inclined herself only marginally nearer, her voice composed, unperturbed. "You presumed my inferiority, that my professional attire implied you could communicate anything devoid of repercussions. However, permit me to inform you, Deference is not a choice, not within this establishment, nor in any location. Her phrases resonated with gravity in the atmosphere. Even those who lacked comprehension of the tongue were observing, attracted by the stark alteration in authority. Ferd sat rigidly, his hand clutching the border of the surface. He surveyed his surroundings, now comprehending that individuals were observing him intently. His haughtiness had previously served as a protective barrier, yet currently it was transforming into a focal point of attention. The quietude extended. Then from a location towards the rear of the dining establishment, a utensil softly struck a dish. Someone murmured. The instant felt vibrant, delicate, everyone anticipating his verbal response. Ferd attempted once more, his vocal quality gentler, the authoritative edge diminishing. You misconstrued my meaning. Danielle elevated an eyebrow, reverting to English so that all present could comprehend. No, I did not. Sounds of surprise spread through the closest seating areas. Now the entirety of the space grasped the situation. Ferd shifted in his sitting position, his refined self-assurance steadily disintegrating. He was unaccustomed to encountering opposition, particularly not of this nature. Danielle did not elevate her vocal pitch. She had no necessity to do so. The reality was evident, clear, and indisputable. For this singular occasion, the immensely wealthy individual was not holding sway. It was the server, with her writing tablet held firmly and the lexicon of his innermost feelings articulated by her. However, authority possesses a tendency to render individuals frantic, and Ferd was not on the verge of relenting without an effort to reclaim a portion of it. Ferd adjusted his posture in his seating apparatus, his countenance a facade of coerced serenity. Yet his visual organs exposed his true state. The composed haughtiness had vanished, supplanted by something approaching discomfort, perhaps even apprehension. Still, he was not the sort of individual to endure degradation silently. He cleared his vocal passage, his voice weighty with an artificial tranquilness. You believe that because you possess linguistic ability? You are my peer. His Arabic resonated more acutely now, less light-hearted, more protective. Danielle showed no hesitation. I have no need to merely believe it. I am certain of it. She paused, her utterances intentional. And your language is not your exclusive possession. It appertains to anyone prepared to honor it, which, unequivocally, you do not. The accompanying individual adjusted his position once more, tugging at his jacket as if desiring to merge with the ground. Ferd, perhaps we ought to? Ferd interrupted him with a gesture of his hand. He inclined his body forward, decreasing his vocal volume, even as the maliciousness persisted. You are simply a service individual. Do you genuinely believe your minor display alters any circumstance? Financial resources determine influence. It always has, and it always will. Danielle inclined her head marginally, her facial expression composed but firm. Wealth might secure you the most advantageous seating within the establishment, yet it cannot procure deference. That must be merited. His facial muscles tensed. He retrieved his eating utensil, pierced a portion of baked goods, and consumed it forcefully. His actions were abrupt, intended to convey authority, but they divulged his exasperation. In close proximity, the pair near the window conversed in hushed tones, their gaze fixed upon the unfolding event. Another gentleman at the counter slightly adjusted his elevated seat, feigning interest in his mobile device, yet distinctly attentive. The atmosphere within the space was no longer understated. Every individual was anticipating, observing. Ferd forcefully brought the eating utensil down. Do you comprehend my identity? Danielle leaned in just a fraction, her vocalization softening. Do you comprehend your own identity devoid of these accoutrements? She indicated discreetly towards his custom-fitted attire, his timepiece, and the vessel of water upon the dining surface. The statements impacted with the force of a rock descending into placid liquid. Ferd's countenance became stern, his self-assurance wavering. He was unaccustomed to being interrogated in such a fashion. Not by commercial competitors, not by subordinates, and certainly not by a serving professional. His companion finally articulated, his voice hushed, yet pressing. "She is correct, Farid. Observers are present. Let us not quietude." Farid retorted sharply, reverting to Arabic, his visage reddened, his grip tightening around his drinking vessel. "Do you consider this female individual worthy of deference? She is merely engaging in trivial pursuits." Danielle lightly folded her arms, her posture unconstrained yet resolute. "Trivial pursuits?" She reiterated in Arabic, her articulation precise, her phrases mirroring his with self-possession. "No, this constitutes existence, and each utterance you have voiced here unveils more concerning your character than it does about mine." The subsequent quietude was oppressive. Even the culinary personnel, partially discernible through the pivoting entrance, had decreased their pace, intrigued by the impending commotion at the forefront. Danielle maintained her steadfastness. She reclined marginally, permitting her demeanor to convey its own message. Her vocal quality softened, yet the resolute strength within it endured. Deference is not bestowed like a wage. It is granted without compulsion, or not at all. And at this precise juncture, no quantity of financial assets within your fiscal reserves can repurchase what you have just forfeited within this enclosure. Farid surveyed his surroundings. Each gaze was directed at him, some imbued with inquisitiveness, others with subdued censure. His thoracic cavity expanded and contracted with increased rapidity now, his meticulously cultivated composure receding further. He compelled an utterance of amusement, though it emerged as forced. "This is absurd. You are creating a public display." Danielle moved her head in negation, her vocalization cleaving the atmosphere with conclusiveness. "No, sir. You instigated the public display the instant you commenced speaking." For a brief interval, nothing stirred. Not a drinking vessel, not an eating utensil, not even the ambient atmosphere itself. The confrontation was revealed completely, impossible to disregard. Yet, the narrative was not exclusively centered on this confrontation. It concerned the underlying reality of Danielle's resilience, a reality that would shortly render the space not merely quiet, but emotionally affected. For an extended duration, the dining establishment appeared to persist in a state of suspended quietude. Farid reclined, grasping his drinking vessel as though clutching it might stabilize him, yet his hands revealed a subtle vibration. His companion repeatedly glanced between him and Danielle, as if mutely imploring for the disagreement to cease. Danielle, nevertheless, remained composed. She recognized this was the opportune moment to alter the atmosphere of the room, not by means of indignation, but by means of veracity. She released a gradual exhalation and, in Arabic, articulated something that neither gentleman anticipated. My maternal grandparent customarily stated, "The linguistic organ is an implement. Employ it to diminish arrogance or to elevate an individual." She imparted that wisdom to me when I was a decade of age in Casablanca. Soft exclamations of astonishment spread gently through the restaurant, even originating from those who lacked Arabic comprehension, simply due to her vocal quality. Subdued, confident, intimately personal. Farid furrowed his brow, his haughtiness beginning to waver. "Casablanca," he reiterated, a sense of incredulity permeating his vocalization. Danielle inclined her head, on this occasion speaking in English so the whole space could comprehend. "My paternal parents' occupation necessitated our relocation abroad during my formative years. My biological parents underwent a marital separation, and I resided with my maternal grandparent for a period of years. She possessed no English-speaking ability, therefore if I desired to engage in discourse with her, if I genuinely wished to understand her, I was compelled to acquire Arabic. She became my entire existence. The linguistic system was not merely a subject I formally pursued. It was an element of my daily experience, Every excursion to the marketplace, every narrative recounted in the evenings, every supplication she uttered quietly. She paused, her gaze unwavering upon Farid. Consequently, when you utilize Arabic to disparage me, you are not exclusively disparaging my person. You are expressing contempt towards the very essence that formed my identity. You are expressing contempt towards the female individual who nurtured me. The atmosphere became heavy with intensity. No one disturbed their meal dishes. The service personnel positioned behind the service area were motionless, their vision fixed on Danielle. Farid adjusted his position uneasily in his seating apparatus. His vocalization diminished as if uncertain whether to persist in confrontation or to withdraw. I was unaware. Danielle's visual focus intensified. That constitutes the precise issue. You exhibited no inclination to ascertain. The companion eventually released an exhalation as though he had been continuously restraining his breath. He inclined his body forward, addressing Danielle softly, his vocal quality demonstrating deference in a manner Farid's never had. Your maternal grandparent? She appears to have been a formidable female. Danielle's demeanor softened merely a fraction at the reference. She indeed was. She instilled in me the principle that inherent worth is not contingent upon one's attire or one's financial holdings. It is contingent upon one's conduct towards individuals who are incapable of offering any benefit in return. The phrase is impacted with the effect of a rock descending into tranquil liquid, generating widespread reactions among every auditor within the enclosure. A female individual at an adjacent seating area gently dried her visual organs with a fabric square. The gentleman seated opposite her slowly moved his head negatively, murmuring, "Incredible." Farid made a difficult swallow. His audaciousness was disintegrating. His digital extremities rhythmically tapped uneasily. Upon the table, a characteristic behavior of a man abruptly rendered uneasy. He surveyed his immediate environment, observing the gazes, recognizing his diminished status as the esteemed individual at the corner seating arrangement. He had become the object of public observation. Danielle did not express triumphant satisfaction. She did not display contempt. Her vocalization remained serene, her physical bearing unwavering. You enter establishments of this nature, anticipating quietude from those who provide you service. Yet you overlook that we too possess means of articulation. And on this particular day, I elected to employ mine. Her phrases resonated throughout the area. Farid briefly lowered his visual organs, the initial manifestation of modesty emerging. The companion conveyed a whispered message to him in Arabic, too softly for others to intercept, yet Farid offered no reply. He remained rigid, engrossed in contemplation. The remaining occupants of the space, however, were not disengaged. They were captivated, absorbed in Danielle's narrative, in the unanticipated revelation of a serving professional, exposing a personal background that commanded deference. But even as Farid remained seated there, constrained by veracity, the narrative had not concluded. The pivotal moment was imminent, when he would be compelled to determine his course of action before the observation of every bystander. Farid's refined self-possession was fracturing akin to crystal under stress. His digital extremities rhythmically struck against the circumference of his water-filled vessel, his visual organs darting towards the exit, then back to Danielle, then to the observing individuals. He had constructed an existence where every environment conformed to his presence. Yet here in the dining establishment of Scottsdale, he was the individual undergoing scrutiny. The supervising authority, a gentleman in his 5th decade of life with partially graying hair named Charles Vega, had been lingering in proximity to the counter, uncertain of the appropriate extent of intervention. However, upon observing the number of patrons who had ceased their consumption, eating utensils suspended in mid-air, gazes fixed on Farid's seating arrangement, he recognized the impossibility of disregarding the situation. He approached with composure, his vocal quality deliberate. "Is there an issue occurring here?" Charles inquired, positioned directly adjacent to Danielle. Ferd adjusted his posture in his seating apparatus, seizing the opportunity to regain his stability. Indeed, this serving professional opted to admonish me during the course of my meal. "I anticipate skilled conduct," not Charles interrupted him, his vocal quality courteous yet resolute. "I have been positioned here for a sufficient duration to ascertain that she conducted herself with greater professionalism than the majority would." The dining establishment emitted a subdued sound of affirmation, a few individuals nodding their heads. Ferd's countenance reddened. He was unaccustomed to encountering opposition. He directed his gaze back at Danielle, his phrases cutting. "You presume you have caused me humiliation, yet all you have accomplished is to demonstrate your station. You are a service provider. I am the patron. That is the operational mechanism of global affairs." Danielle remained motionless. Her vocalization was unwavering. "No, sir, that is merely your perception of how global affairs operate." The subdued assurance in her vocal quality affected more acutely than any derogatory remark. Individuals inclined themselves nearer, absorbing every utterance. Ferd's companion eventually articulated, his vocal quality possessing greater significance than previously. "Ferd, perhaps it is appropriate to cease. You are not prevailing in this situation." That solitary statement impacted with the force of a physical blow. For the inaugural time throughout the entire afternoon, Ferd's dominance openly receded. His very own colleague had taken the side of the serving professional. Ferd's facial muscles tensed, yet his upper body relaxed marginally. His gaze traversed the space. In every direction he cast his gaze, individuals were observing intently, evaluating. The immensely wealthy individual who believed himself to possess every environment he entered had transformed into the figure everyone pitied, even held in contempt. Danielle once more interrupted the quietude, her vocal quality gentler now. "You inquired of me earlier whether I considered myself your equivalent. The reality is, I do not require your authorization to be so. Every individual present in this enclosure already comprehends the response." The phrases impacted with instantaneous intensity. A gentle wave of subdued agreements permeated the dining establishment. A female individual at the corner seating arrangement murmured, "Her assertion is accurate." A gentleman positioned near the counter added under his breath, "It was due time for someone to articulate it." Ferd's upper body slumped. He parted his mouth, yet no utterances emerged. For the inaugural time within his recollection, he was devoid of speech, not due to an absence of communication, but because nothing he could articulate would rectify what he had fractured. Charles, the supervising authority, directed a pointed gaze at him. "Sir, you are invited to remain and conclude your meal without further disturbance, but if this behavior persists, I shall be compelled to request your departure." Ferd made a difficult swallow, inclining his head rigidly, his visual organs directed downwards towards the surface, away from the scrutinizing gazes that intensely impacted him from all directions. He appeared reduced in stature now, not due to his attire or his official designation, but because he had been divested of the singular element he esteemed most highly, mastery. Danielle exhibited no triumphant self-satisfaction. She merely straightened her writing tablet, secured her writing implement behind her auditory organ, and stated calmly, "Your lamb dish will be delivered momentarily." Her composure only intensified the imparted instruction. She harbored no necessity to debase him. He had accomplished that independently, and as she departed, every individual within the dining establishment seemed to inhale simultaneously, as though they had collectively retained their breath throughout the tumultuous period. Yet the true resolution was not found in quietude. It resided in the subsequent events. When Ferd was compelled to confront not merely Danielle, but the inescapable realization, the lamb arrived subsequent to a few minutes, meticulously arranged by the culinary team, who were equally absorbed in the unfolding situation as all others. Danielle conveyed it with the identical elegance she extended to every patron, placing the dish before Farid as if no unusual event had transpired. No biting wit, no prolonged scrutiny, merely a display of professional conduct. Farid directed his gaze upwards towards her, but on this occasion his visual organs did not convey that same air of dominance. They wavered, hesitant, as though he was uncertain what he was expected to articulate, or if he possessed any entitlement to speak whatsoever. His companion sat rigidly alongside him, declining to engage his gaze, excessively mortified by the public display. For a period, the sole audible sounds at the seating arrangement were the gentle impact of eating implements and the friction of cutting instruments against dishware. The remainder of the dining establishment gradually recommenced its habitual activities, though the impact of the recent occurrence still permeated the atmosphere. Individuals briefly lifted their gazes from their meals intermittently, furtively observing Farid, then reverting their attention to Danielle, as if silently expressing support for her. At the midpoint of consuming the lamb, Farid eventually set down his eating utensil. He cleared his vocal passage. His vocal quality was now more subdued, divested of haughtiness. "You articulate with grace," he expressed in Arabic. Danielle inclined her head marginally, her visual organs unwavering. It is not the linguistic system itself that possesses aesthetic quality. It is the deference you imbue it with. His mouth opened, then resealed. For an individual accustomed to finalizing agreements worth billions of currency units, accustomed to presiding over entire corporate governance bodies, the significance of those phrases was more substantial than anything he had previously borne. The companion eventually interrupted the quietude, speaking with gentleness. "Fared, perhaps this represents the type of instant you are meant to retain in memory. Financial assets diminish. Deference endures. Fared." He offered no reply. His visual organs drifted towards the fenestration, out to the luminous thoroughfares of Arizona, where existence proceeded, unaffected by his affluence or his self-esteem. He drew a gradual inhalation, inclined his head once, and murmured in English, "Perchance your assessment is correct." When Danielle reappeared to remove the dishes, Farid reached inside his outer garment, extracted his money holder, and placed several pristine banknotes onto the service apparatus. However, when she extended her hand towards it, she did not even cast a glance at the monetary offering. She engaged him in direct eye contact and articulated, "Deference holds greater significance than gratuities." Her phrases impacted with more weight than the currency ever could. Farid displayed hesitation, then offered a slight, almost undetectable inclination of his head. It did not constitute an explicitly voiced act of contrition, but it represented the nearest approximation he had ever offered. As Farid and his companion departed from the dining establishment, the enclosure felt less burdened. Patrons recommenced their consumption. Discourses resumed, yet the narrative had already embedded itself within their cognitive faculties. They had been privy to an uncommon occurrence, not merely a confrontation, but a revelation of veracity. Charles, the supervising authority, proceeded past Danielle and administered a gentle tap upon her upper arm. "Executed with expertise," he quietly expressed. She merely offered a faint smile and resumed her professional duties. But the underlying communication persisted long after the exit closed behind the immensely wealthy individual. The reality was uncomplicated. Designations, financial resources, and influence might solicit notice, yet they can never compel deference. That is an attribute acquired exclusively through treating individuals with intrinsic worth. And occasionally, the most potent means of articulation do not originate from corporate executive committees or elevated speaking platforms. They emanate from the precise individuals whom the global community undervalues. Therefore, here is the instruction to carry with you. Never presume to comprehend an individual's personal history. Never undervalue their inherent power. And never disregard that deference incurs no financial expenditure, yet it can signify absolute totality. If you are observing this at the present moment, question yourself, how do you engage with the individuals providing you service? The ones maintaining open entrances, conveying your consignments, or presenting your sustenance? Do you acknowledge their presence, or do you disregard them? Because at some future point you might discover that the individual you dismissed is precisely the one who imparts to you the most crucial instruction you required. Treat individuals with deference without exception. If this narrative emotionally affected you, disseminate it. Prompt someone significant to you that inherent worth is invaluable and deference is never a matter of choice.